it's kind of interesting with existing homes, despite sales falling, they reached the highest average or median price ever recorded. So that's not good for news for consumers who want to go out and buy a house, because mortgage rates are still very high. I think somewhere in the 6.8 to 7% range, not as high as 8% notched at the end of last year, but still prohibitive for potential home buyers. And when you add that into the higher median prices, it makes buying a house more difficult, and contributes to consumer woes with the overall economy right now.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by economics reporter Zach Halaschak. Zach, you down with GDP? Yeah, you know me. What is the latest figure for economic growth?
Yeah, so we just got the first reading of the second quarter's GDP numbers, and it showed that GDP grew by 2.8%. That's much higher than most analysts had expected. They'd expected to expand by about 2%. So it's good news for the Biden administration and for Kamala Harris, who's now presumably going to be the Democratic nominee, because she could say, look, the economy is growing under Biden. We're not slowing. It's moving in the right direction. And it's notably higher than the 1.4% notched in the first quarter of this year. So any sort of acceleration like that is going to be used as political fodder.
And what are the risks of this being revised down at some point before the election?
So this is the first of 3 revisions the Bureau of Economic Analysis does. In the coming weeks, basically, they're going to revise their GDP estimates to kind of reflect changes and kind of reorganization as they're looking at the numbers more closely and the data more closely. So there's a chance that this goes down, and there's also a chance that this actually gets revised up. It's just yet to be seen. We'll see maybe a percentage or point to swing in either direction, but it's, like I said, it just kind of needs to be seen how it shakes out eventually.
Sure. What's the trend with new home sales?
Yeah, new home sales are down, and so are existing home sales. For the newest data for this past month in June just came out, and it showed that existing homes are fallen to multi-month lows, so are new home sales. But it's kind of interesting with existing homes, despite sales falling, they reached the highest average or median price ever recorded. So that's not good for news for consumers who want to go out and buy a house, because mortgage rates are still very high. I think somewhere in the 6.8 to 7% range, not as high as 8% notched at the end of last year, but still prohibitive for potential home buyers. And when you add that into the higher median prices, it makes buying a house more difficult, and contributes to consumer woes with the overall economy right now.
So Republicans are trying to take back the Senate. You've been talking to a number of Republican Senate candidates who are working toward that goal about some of their policy objectives and their economic plans. And the latest you've talked to is Mike Rogers in Michigan. What are some of the things you learned?
Yeah, so I was talking to Mike Rogers. One big thing I always like to talk to these candidates about is trade, because within the Republican Party, there's been a sort of pretty monumental shift in recent years away from like the free market, open market policies that kind of dominated Republican politics for decades to this more protectionist, populist kind of stance. You have Trump, who's proposed raising tariffs 10% across the board. I asked Rogers about that. He did not endorse that plan. He kind of didn't push back, but he did de-emphasize that. He did say one aspect of Trump's trade policy agenda he did like was the idea of something called the Reciprocal Trade Act. And what that would do would basically be give the president, whoever that would be, power to impose equal tariffs. So if a country is imposing a certain level of tariffs against us, we could reimpose that back unilaterally to kind of make it reciprocal, to make it even. So that's kind of a give from him, showing that even though he might not support the bigger tariff proposals, Republicans are warming to some of these ideas.
And Rogers has sort of some common goal with Trump as well, in that Michigan is a presidential battleground state. The better Trump does in the state, the better his chances, should he be the nominee, of winning that Senate race.
Absolutely. It's a give and take for both of them, and Michigan is one of those key states that Trump wants to win, along with several other Rust Belt states. And some of the voters in states like that kind of prefer these more populist ideas, especially when he talks about bringing work and jobs back to the U.S. and building out the manufacturing base and that sort of thing.
Thank you, Zach. You can read Zach and the rest of our policy team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.